You know why, Dana, the New York Times didn't pay any taxes?
Why?
Because they lose money like a kale chip stand at a state fair. It is the.
You don't love the kale chip stand?
It is a. Well, no, I mean.
Actually, you know what? I have a thing against kale. Did you know that?
No, I
just don't love it. I don't love it.
But quinoa.
No, it's kind of okay.
Mm-hmm. But the New York Times didn't pay taxes because they don't make any money.
But
Donald Trump made money.
Well, no, but this issue in question is that he had a huge loss, and he admits that.
Right.
He had a huge loss.
1995 was not a good year. Taj Mahal, I think it was a Taj Mahal.
But a big enough loss to then maybe perhaps not to have to pay federal income taxes for 18 years. That's a pretty big deal. And even if, I don't think Trump supporters are going to care necessarily, but as taxpayers, shouldn't we be mad at the system that allows that to happen?
I mean, yeah, but there's so much that stinks about the way that the government does things, so whatever. I only care about politics and the crass application thereof.
Okay.
And I am I mean, whoever's going to win the election is whoever's going to win the election. That's not my job, and America's going to get what it deserves. But the truth is, I am frustrated because I'm like a sportscaster who watches, and I like to see the game played well. This thing with these taxes, as just from people who practice politics, this is malpractice. You get this out in May. He didn't do anything illegal. He didn't do anything wrong. It's not. So you have a huge loss. He lost almost $1 billion more than 20 years ago, which now would be even more than $1 billion in adjusted dollars. So you have a bad year. So he exploits, but uses the tax laws to do this. You put this out in May. He clinches the nomination. He clinched the nomination the first week of May in Indiana. A week later, you put this out. Everybody complains. New York Times, everybody says blah, 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 blah. And it's over. It's June and it's over. It's gone away. But instead, they thought they could run it all the way out without talking about his taxes. This is an unforced error and a mistake that they didn't need to make.
Well, and also, so there's he's tweeted in the past, over the last several years, one of the things he complained about is only 50% of Americans pay income taxes.
Right.
Well, he was one of those that didn't have to, apparently, under the... And they're not saying that it's wrong.
Right, it was not the earned income tax
And they're
credit.
not saying that it was... well, I guess they're saying it was illegal to get the documents somehow, that they got them illegally. The New York Times is saying that they arrived in their inbox. That's actually an interesting story of how that actually happened.
From Trump Tower.
Like hard copy mail, not like a leaked recording.
Oh, I've gotten those. Have you ever gotten those?
I get some stuff in the mail that's great. I mean, often people send me, they're amazing, sort of like a needlepoint thing of Jasper, and I love it, of my dog Jasper. But sometimes I get creepy things in the mail. I don't always like to open it.
I didn't mean that. I meant tips. When I was a working reporter, I used to get the tips, and I remember
the suggestion box.
No, like here are the documents. Here's the greasy grease. Here's the dirty dirt, and the governor's doing this with the woman from the development office, and this guy's doing that and the other stuff. And so you have this, and you're like, can I? And so what do you then have to do? You have to go then corroborate what you got. And the New York Times in this case. I mean, I'm no media critic, but I will say this. The New York Times in this case definitely did the homework to check it out, and I'm sure that they agonized over whether or not to use it. But at a certain point, your desire as a journalist to put it out overwhelms, and I'll put it this way, or I'll tell you what.
Okay.
If it's not true, if it's wrong, Donald Trump is going to roast them.
Well, I don't think that they're saying that, right?
Right.
So nobody at the Trump campaign said that it was wrong, but they do think that they benefit from targeting the media and saying, well, this is just, the New York Times is just in the can for Hillary Clinton. But I have to say that the New York Times was the one that broke the story about the Clinton Global Initiative.
Yes. And what about every time WikiLeaks leaks a wiki, everybody that goes panting after it? So the commodity of this election is the leak. Let
me ask you, though, timing-wise, because we have 37 days until the election. So this would be considered, I guess you could call this an October surprise, even though, as you point out, it didn't have to be an October surprise. But it is. But 37 days, will that matter? Because between now and then, we have 2 more presidential debates, which might be determinative of the election.
Right.
What do you think?
Okay. The election is underway. Votes are being cast today. Votes will be cast tomorrow. Early voting, probably as much as, I don't know, 40% of the votes, 35% of the votes will be cast early. And we can have a different discussion about whether it's appropriate for people to be casting ballots before the elections are done and whether or not their minds would change. For most of the people who are voting early, though, they're voting early because they know exactly what they're going to do.
They're already locked in.
They're totally locked in. So the election's underway. So we're out of time in a very real sense that we are here. But from a narrative point of view and for this shifting for this 5, to 8% of the electorate that seems to be shifty. They're moving back and forth.
Well, you mean that in the nicest way possible.
In the nicest possible way.
They're not like shifty.
I could call them feckless, but that would be mean. I would never say that about them.
No, they're just being thoughtful.
Oh, yeah.
I would say they're being thoughtful.
They're being thoughtful. Or they're anguishing.
That's true.
So I'll give them that. But for these voters, who are going based on who has a good week and who has a bad week, and we've watched how the polls have crested and rolled, there are 3 weeks is plenty of time for a lot of stuff to happen.